I'm Jennifer Sanasi, you're watching News 24 Live. Joining me in studio is investigative journalist Hazel Friedman and on Skype, Patricia Gerber, director of Locked Up in a Foreign Country. Today we're going to be unpacking the state of drug mules and human trafficking in South Africa. Patricia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me on your show.
Hazel, thank you so much for joining us in studio.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. It's good to be here.
Now, Hazel, you've just recently released a book, Dead Cows for Piranhas. Can you introduce us to some of the research you do in that book so we can lay a groundwork for what we're going to be speaking about today?
You know, the research has traversed about 6 years and began innocuously enough. I was sent to Thailand for special assignment to interview South African drug mules who were incarcerated there. But while I was there, I made a horrifying discovery. Prior to my trip, I had not judged drug mules and drug traffickers, or drug couriers, but I kind of felt a degree of contempt towards them. They knew what they were doing, what got them into it, whether it was either greed or stupidity. Basically, they did the crime, they must do the time. But when I met a certain young woman who'd been arrested and subsequently convicted of drug smuggling, I found out that in fact some of them had been coerced or tricked into carrying drugs, and basically they'd been tricked into doing so for the sole purpose of getting arrested as decoys. Hence the title Dead Cows, which is the term used by customs officials and the syndicates to describe these people who are designated without their knowledge to be the fall guys, the sacrificial lambs in a very, very sophisticated, ruthless industry.
Now I want to speak about that in just a moment, but before we do, Patricia, I'd like you to tell me what you do as director of Locked Up in a Foreign Country.
Well, our organization, firstly, we try to bring an awareness of the situation of our people being arrested abroad, and then we are there to support families and those in the prisons where possible, like linking them with, if somebody's caught in Brazil, with various other family members who are also have a loved one in Brazil. And we try to encourage and support them as much as possible. We are also trying everywhere possible, when a South African is released from prison, they have no means of getting back home, so they live off the streets. And we have been very fortunate that some good people have come forward and have been supporting us by helping us bring them back home with an air ticket.
Now, Patricia, what got you involved in this? Why start an organization like this?
Well, it all started with my son being arrested in Mauritius in 2005. And he was living at home, and he was very young when he was arrested. He barely turned 20, and what happened was I started asking questions, because the Mauritian police had told me how that the South African police informed them to await the South Africans on their arrival at the airport. And I was asking, why are they not stopped in South Africa? Because all the alleged crimes were committed here.
Now, Hazel, is this a story you hear often? You've heard often?
Well, this is the thing. Through my contact with Patricia, I kind of got not a crash course, but a pretty profound course in terms of the irregularities, and that's a polite word, to describe some of the ways in which law enforcement and our government handles cases of drug trafficking. In fact, what Patricia and I, the conclusion that we came to was, in fact, first of all, that many of those apprehended for drug trafficking are in fact not drug smugglers, but in fact they're victims of human trafficking. But what makes their situation more perilous is the fact that our government seems to have this policy of out of sight, out of mind. It suits them better, and certainly law enforcement officials, to have the mules or the decoys arrested outside of South Africa, because it takes the pressure off them to actually do a thorough investigation as to who is behind the drug trade, the kingpins, and also for South Africa, who doesn't have a prisoner transfer treaty, it's kind of as I said, it's a convenient way of saying out of sight, out of mind. You supposedly committed a crime. We don't have to dig further to actually get to the root of it, to unearth who is really behind it. We've got the fall guys, and you might be good for the statistics because the arrest of a drug decoy or a drug mule is very good for statistics. It does nothing ultimately in terms of helping or fighting the war on drugs.
In the past 20 years, there's only been one investigation, and that was the case of the Cheryl Quelle, who was the then Minister of Intelligence wife, and Frank Nabaliza. And for every South African sitting in a foreign prison, there is a recruiter and drug lord. So why are there no investigations being done?